The 1st of September, 1939. After a false accusation that the Poles attacked a German radio station, Nazi Germany launches a retaliatory campaign against Poland, triggering World War II. Poland finds itself fighting a two-front war when it's invaded by the Soviet Union from the east on the 17th of September. Warsaw officially surrenders to the Germans on the 28th of September, and one day later, in accordance with a secret protocol to their non-aggression pact, Germany and the Soviet Union partition Poland. After defeating the Polish army, the Germans ruthlessly suppressed the Poles, whom they considered to be racially inferior. And in the weeks following the German attack on Poland, German SS, police, and military units shoot thousands of Polish civilians, including many members of the Polish nobility, clergy, and intelligentsia. Approximately 1.8 million Jews remaining within the area occupied by Germany are imprisoned in ghettos, and after the German invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, over 3 million Polish Jews are deported to Nazi concentration camps. One such camp is Stutthof, and one of its most infamous guards becomes Johann Pauls. Johann Pals, the third child of Johann August Pauls and Mina Steingräber, was born on the 9th of February 1908 in Danzig, then part of the German Empire. Following World War I, Danzig became the capital of the Free City of Danzig. In the 1919 Treaty of Versailles, the victorious powers, the United States, Great Britain, France, and other allied states, imposed punitive territorial, military, and economic treaty terms on the defeated Germany. One provision required Germany to cede West Prussia, including Danzig, today's Gdansk, to the newly reconstructed state of Poland, which was given certain rights pertaining to the port facilities in the city. Danzig, a largely ethnically German city, became a free city under the protection of the League of Nations, but with special administrative ties to Poland. However, Germany resented the loss of this largely German city, and after Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party came into power in January 1933, he was determined to overturn the military and territorial provisions of the Versailles Treaty. After the Nazi Party became the leading power in Danzig in May 1933, anti-Polish sentiment increased, and both Germanization and segregation policies intensified. Political opposition to the Nazis was repressed, with several politicians being imprisoned and murdered. The rights of local Poles were commonly violated and limited by local administration. As a result, Polish children were refused admission to public Polish language schools, and premises were not allowed to be rented to Polish schools and preschools. From 1937, the employment of Poles by German companies was prohibited, and already employed Poles were fired. The use of Polish in public places was banned, and the Poles were not allowed to enter several restaurants, in particular those owned by Germans. However, this was not the case of Johann Pauls, who was an ethnic German and ardent Nazi. In April 1931, he joined the Nazi Party and the SS, and 2 years later, in 1933, shortly after Hitler came into power, he married 19-year-old Lena Johanna Olsner. The marriage produced 8 children. After his training as a bridge builder and further training as a bridge master, Pauls was employed as a Senate worker for the Free City of Danzig, and from the 21st of July 1939, he served in the reserve police force. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939. The same month, the Germans established the Stutthof camp in the wooded area west of Stutthof, a town about 22 miles east of Danzig. The original camp, known as the Old Camp, was surrounded by barbed wire fences and 8 barracks for the inmates built by prisoners in 1940. The camp was established in connection with the ethnic cleansing project that included the liquidation of Polish elites, such as members of the intelligentsia, as well as religious and political leaders. Even before the war, the Germans had created lists of people to be arrested, and the Nazi authorities were secretly reviewing suitable places to set up concentration camps in their area. Originally, Stutthof was a civilian internment camp under the Danzig police chief before its subsequent massive expansion. In November 1941, it became a labor education camp for political prisoners and persons accused of violating labor discipline, administered by the SD, the German security police. Finally, in January 1942, Stutthof became a regular concentration camp under the jurisdiction of the SS. In 1943, the camp was enlarged and a new camp was constructed alongside the earlier one. It contained 30 new barracks and was surrounded by electrified barbed wire fences. A crematorium and gas chamber were added in 1943, just in time to start mass executions when Stutthof was included in the final solution in June 1944. The maximum capacity of the gas chamber was 150 people per execution. Eventually, the Stutthof camp system became a vast network of forced labor camps. 105 Stutthof subcamps were established throughout northern and central German-occupied Poland. Tens of thousands of people, perhaps as many as 100,000, were deported to the Stutthof camp. The prisoners were mainly non-Jewish Poles. Conditions in the camp were brutal. Many prisoners died in typhus epidemics that swept the camp in the winter of 1942 and again in 1944. Those whom the SS guards judged too weak or sick to work were gassed in the gas chamber. Gassing with Zyklon B gas began in June 1944. 4,000 prisoners, including Jewish women and children, were killed in a gas chamber before the evacuation of the camp. Camp doctors also killed sick or injured prisoners in the infirmary with lethal injections of phenol. More than 60,000 people died in Stutthof concentration camp and its subcamps. Until 1942, nearly all of the prisoners were Polish. The number of inmates increased considerably in 1944, with Jews forming a significant proportion of the newcomers. The first contingent of 2,500 Jewish prisoners arrived from Auschwitz in July 1944. In total, 23,566 Jews, including 21,817 women, were transferred to Stutthof from Auschwitz. The camp staff consisted of SS guards and, after 1943, Ukrainian auxiliaries. Until March 1943, Pauls served in the Waffen-SS infantry as an SS rifleman in reserve. The Waffen-SS was the military branch of the SS. In April 1943, Pauls was transferred to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp to be trained as the future commandant of the guards in Stutthof, with the rank of SS Oberscharführer. At Stutthof, Pauls was fully aware of the atrocities which guards under his command committed on defenseless prisoners, and tolerated them. Some, such as Jenny-Wanda Barkmann, were known for beating female inmates, including children, to death, either with their bare hands or with their whip, and others such as Wanda Klaff would drown the female inmates in mud or club them to death just because they were in a particularly bad mood. Pauls, as their supervisor, did nothing to stop them. In addition, he was head of the Waldkolonne, or forest column, which was a prisoner commander responsible for clearing and leveling the land for the expanding camp. Their work also involved cutting down trees and transporting heavy logs. The death rate at Waldkolonne was very high, reaching 60%. The reason was that inmates worked on starvation rations and under constant mistreatment from SS men and capos. Johann Pauls would treat these prisoners inhumanely, beating and kicking them when it seemed to him that they were not working hard enough. The evacuation of prisoners from the Stutthof camp system in northern Poland began in January 1945. When the final evacuation began, there were nearly 50,000 prisoners in the Stutthof camp system, the overwhelming majority of them Jews. About 5,000 prisoners from the Stutthof subcamps were marched to the Baltic Sea coast, forced into the water, and machine-gunned. The rest of the prisoners were marched in the direction of Lauenburg in East Germany, but after they were cut off by advancing Soviet forces, the Germans forced the surviving prisoners back to Stutthof. Marching in severe winter conditions and treated brutally by the SS guards, thousands died during the march. In late April 1945, the remaining prisoners were removed from Stutthof by sea, since Stutthof was completely encircled by Soviet forces. Again, hundreds of prisoners were forced into the sea and shot. It has been estimated that over 25,000 prisoners, 1 in 2, died during the evacuation from Stutthof and its subcamps. When the Soviet forces liberated Stutthof on the 9th of May 1945, they found only about 100 prisoners who had managed to hide during the final evacuation of the camp. Altogether, some 100,000 prisoners passed through Stutthof, 60,000 of them perished, while another 22,000 were transferred to other concentration camps. Justice finally caught up with Johann Pauls when he was tried at the first Stutthof trial, which began on the 25th of April, 1946. Pauls and his Nazi comrades all pleaded not guilty to the general charge of war crimes, and his former female colleagues were said to have behaved insolently, giggling and joking during the proceedings. The trial ended on the 31st of May, and Pauls was sentenced to death by hanging. His execution was held publicly and became a theatre of horror, which was recorded by official press photographers. After World War II, only 3 public executions of war criminals were carried out in Poland. One of them took place at Biskupia Górka Hill near Gdansk, former Danzig. When on the 4th of July 1946, 11 Nazi criminals from the Stutthof concentration camp, including the 38-year-old Johann Pauls, were hanged from the gallows, 200,000 people were watching. On that day, Biskupia Górka Hill experienced a real siege. 3 days earlier, the newspapers had reported the date of the execution, and workplaces announced a day off and provided employees with transport to the event. Everyone could come to witness the execution. The security forces feared that a lynching might occur at any moment, and the militia and army had difficulty controlling the huge crowd. The 4th of July was very warm, the sun was shining. Punctually at 5 p.m., 11 open trucks brought the prisoners to the execution ground, their hands and legs tied with cords. On the platform of each of the 11 trucks stood a convict, 6 men, and 5 women in total. The trucks were backed under the gallows, and the condemned made to stand on the tailboards or on the chairs on which they had been sitting. Former Stutthof prisoners, dressed in striped uniforms, volunteered to serve as executioners and put a simple cord noose around the convicts' necks. The execution was planned in such a way that after each truck would be driven forward, the 11 convicts would be left suspended, and their bodies would not fall from too great a height. As a result, the nooses did not break their necks and did not cause an instant death. This short drop method of hanging resulted in a torturous death by strangulation of each of the criminals, lasting anywhere from 10 to 20 long minutes. When the driver of the first truck, carrying Johan Pals, started the engine and moved slowly forward, Pauls, before sliding off the platform and hanging on the rope, managed to shout "Heil Hitler." He was answered by the insults of the crowd. Seconds later, his body began to shake and convulse. His bound hands bent in unbelievable ways, and his face was set in a terrible grimace. Pauls' death was long and painful, and after his body eventually went still, another truck started moving forward, and another criminal began what those present at the execution described as a rope dance. As each truck moved forward, the other convicts had the opportunity to take a good look at what awaited them in the next few moments. When one truck driver failed to start the engine several times, the former Stutthof prisoner pushed the convict off the platform. The crowd waved, and the people shouted, "For our husbands, for our children." When the last convict died, the security forces allowed the crowd to the gallows. People ripped off buttons, cut off pieces of fabric, and kicked and smashed the corpses. The gathered people were then chased away, and the bodies were removed from the gallows. They were then taken to the Medical University of Gdansk to be used as a teaching aid in anatomy classes. There were no tears shed for Johann Pauls. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.